you have not, need to get those in as soon as you can. But I want to keep going with Pixel Portrait. So what I've got here is a printout of the picture I'm going to use. If you remember, we were talking about the pictures and making sure you have strong lighting situations so you can see light and shadow and all the different values. So there is a sample folder, and I'll show you that a little bit later, but I want to kind of maybe just start off by doing some painting here. What I did is I rubbed the back with charcoal pencil. Then I had already drawn out this diamond grid here on top of my Bristol paper. I put this down and I can trace the top. When I do that, I get the drawing. Since putting the charcoal down, I have redrawn with my pencil on top of that so that it won't smudge anymore. Charcoal is very smudgy. If I was very diligent, I would have taken my eraser and pulled up all this. There's like some dirtiness inside the face that's not over here on the sides. But I think it's more important to maybe just get started painting, talk about how to go through and starting to block this in. So I want to start with purple just because it's a nice dark color. It's easy to use. And I basically have two choices anytime I'm going to go through and do this. I can start with white and start with lighter colors, lighter values, and go to my darks. Or I can start with the darker colors and work towards the lights. I am going to have this guy over to the side so I can see it. So I can see the values on my photo. I'm just having it off screen so it doesn't block. Maybe I can put it right up there so you can see it. So let's start with lights. So just analyzing this and looking at it, places up near the eyes and the highlights, the cheek, maybe parts of the neck, the forehead. I can paint some light back here because he's got a dark side to the hair. So behind it, if I have a light value, that's good. So I'm looking at those areas to try and add some light to. So I've got this brush, which is a rigger. I should have a bigger brush. I have a 1-inch brush, but that's too big, I think, to get started. So I'm going to use this other one. So what I'm going to do is every color that you pick, and I want you to pick, 5, 6 colors, is you want to start with the lightest values or the darkest, doesn't matter, but you want to have 5 or 6 different values of each color. So I'm going to start, because I'm starting with the light, I'm going to grab a gob of white first. Okay, and then I'm just going to dip my brush inside that purple and add just a little bit. And I found a little pocket of water, so that's not good. I'm going to move my paint over here. I need more white. Now, every color that you mix, if you remember, acrylic's always going to dry a little bit darker. So I'm going to mix this up. It looks super light right now. I want a pretty light purple. My experience is that purple dries quite a bit darker than it looks. So I'm trying to keep it pretty light. To you, it probably just looks barely off white, and that's probably what I want. I have a big grid on the outside, and then I have a small fine grid on top of the smaller areas. So I'm going to not worry about the drawing. I'm not trying to follow the drawing. The drawing's there for a guide. In the beginning, I'm just looking at the values on my printout to try and help me figure out where to put things. So I'm going to do some paints in the background. I'm just more or less trying to paint in a few of these squares. And I'm going to hop around. I'm going to paint different ones. I'm not trying to do like a pattern or every other one. I'm just trying to find some spots that I think that works. And I'll paint some of those in. You could tape off the edges if you like. What I ended up doing is this is 10 inches across by 12. You could do a 6 by 8. The thing that you'll have to do is you'll have to shrink down your photo to fit that. Probably your best bet is an 8 by 10, I would imagine. And the camera, I think, is picking this up well because of the shadow coming in from outside. It doesn't look as dark here as it does where you see it, to me. But I'll find a couple spots maybe on the forehead and paint in a square. So I'm just popping around looking for light areas. Here's a square up on top of the eyebrow ridge. Maybe I'll do a couple on the cheeks. Where are those light areas? I have a smaller grid, so I can paint in a smaller square in those areas. And I'm trying to just paint in the square. I'm not worried about whether I go outside of that square. And I don't want to always paint right next to each other every time. I want to move around. Overall, I'm looking for about 20 or so different spots that I'm going to paint in right now with this value, and then I'm going to move to a darker purple. That's my next step. Maybe we'll do a semi-big one down there. Sometimes I will use the edge of the drawing to kind of do it, but for the most part, I'm just trying to paint in a square at the beginning. The more you can kind of abstract yourself from the drawing, the better. The one thing you don't want to do is start, painting along the lines that you've drawn. You're painting on top of the drawing to make it kind of disappear rather than trying to make the drawing what you're painting the whole time. Here's the highlight on the nose. Get a couple more on the cheeks here. Maybe another one on the forehead. I'm trying to think. Maybe we could get one down here on the shirt. And the thing that's good about this is at the beginning, you can't really tell where it is and how it's going to all work out. But as you get more painted in and you get to the point where you're almost there, you can adjust these. If I put the wrong value, this is too light and I need to change it, I can paint over it later and that'll just fix it. So it's okay if it's not perfect. Go over that one more time. All right, so I think that's about 20 for this value. So I don't really need to wash out my brush. I'm just going to dip it in a little more purple, and I'm going to make it a slightly darker value. So I want this to be not a huge jump in value, but a little bit darker. So now another thing I can do is if I want to test a value, I can just take my brush, take my paint, and I can put a little dab of paint right on top of my printout. And that allows me to check that and see after it dries, is it too dark, is it too light? So I'm looking at the areas right next to the darker areas. So I'll find a couple of those to paint in. These are going to be a little bit darker. These are lights, but they're lights in the transition area. And you can also choose to paint in one or two of these at a time. You don't have to only do one at a time. Say I wanted to do these two big ones up here at the same time. That's fine. I can kind of pop around and choose which ones I want to paint, how big, where they go. Sometimes you do have them next to each other, but don't make a habit of always painting, you know, a purple next to a purple. You want to keep it scattered. You know, there is another way where you can go through and, you know, paint out all the values in the nose, and you have all your paint set up and you're doing all your darks in the dark areas and all your lights in the light areas. That is a way to do this. It's easier to see what you're doing, but it also takes a lot more time. And it also, I think, it wastes a lot more paint as well. It's more tedious, it's more work. So I usually like to do it like this. It makes it pretty fast. I can usually finish this in about 3 hours, maybe total of painting, sometimes even less, just depending on what else is going on in the classroom. Put some on this ear over here. There's a couple spots that are a little bit lighter because they're catching some light. And if I'm guessing wrong and this needs to be darker, I can fix that later. It's okay. Doesn't have to be perfect. Some nice ones on the cheek here. I want to make sure I'm not grouping too many of them together in the same area. You know, a lot of your lighter values are going to go in the lighter areas. I think that's, well, I'll do a couple in the background really quick. I didn't really do any background ones. Let's do some maybe behind the head. You can't see that one because it's under the copy, but a couple over here. I'm trying not to stay in the same zone, moving around. Move those over so you can see it. Maybe a couple down here too. It does get darker down here, and I do want that to happen. Like there's a blanket back behind, and I do want that effect. I'm not going to paint a blanket texture though. All right, so now I've got two values down. I've got a really, really light purple and then a slightly darker purple starting to kind of set in. It does look darker on your screen than it does to me down here. So I'll take a picture at the end and we'll look at that. But now, pull some of that water away. I didn't bring a paper towel over here, I should have. Now we want our halftone values. So those are the ones that are, and I'm going to make it pretty opaque. I'm adding extra paint so that it's not too watery. I don't want to go too watery. But now value-wise, we want to be kind of near the middle. We're getting closer to the middle, maybe on the lighter side of the middle values, but purple is going to allow us to get pretty dark because it's like a dark, dark purple. So I'm looking at areas right along this edge where light and shadow meet. That's what I'm trying to get and paint next, hopefully. So what I'm doing is if I'm thinking that the light is over here on the right side, I'm slowly moving when I go from darker to lighter, I'm moving over this way towards the shadows. So maybe something on the ear over here. It's still kind of light, but it's starting to get darker. Maybe one of this squares right there. Maybe over here near the edge of the hair. There's some of the cheek that's catching a little bit of that light. There's a good one there. I'm going to fill in two there on the underside of the nose. I am not always perfectly staying inside the squares, you'll notice. That's okay. The point is I'm not trying to fill in a whole area at once. I'm doing lots of little strokes. We're almost thinking of this as a, what do they call it? Pointillism. Get some in the eyes. This is probably closer to the value inside the eyes. One here, maybe up near the hair. There's probably some of the hair that, that was a big stroke, not staying in a square. I could do that every once in a while, but I'm not trying to draw with my paint. I'm still trying to just do, this is like built up brush strokes. I'm not trying to like fill anything completely in. Get one over here, maybe something in the middle of the hair that catches light. Maybe there's a little area up here that's a little bit lighter than the rest of the hair value. And every time you get, somewhere around, you've got, 20, maybe 30 little brush strokes. It's time to move to a new value. It's time to move to a new area. You don't want to keep going all the time. By just doing a few and then moving to the next, it'll keep building it up, and the whole thing kind of stays put together that way. And my feeling is I may end up doing something where I paint in a lot of this, but I might crop the bottom. I might take off the bottom edge because it just doesn't, I don't need any of that down there as I'm kind of starting to look at this, even though that makes a weird size for that. But 11, if I can figure out how to get, trim it to get an 8.5, then I have a nice copy size that I could put in a frame if I ever wanted to. So I'm thinking about some of those sizes of things. I think I'm ready to switch to the next value. So now we're looking for a little bit darker. We're moving into the shadow now. So we want our darker values. I'm going to grab a decent chunk of purple now, mix that in. If every time, you think about values, you take a step or 2 steps darker, you'll be fine when you have 5 or 6 values total. So now this is quite a bit darker. I'm looking for, kind of this like core shadow areas or reflected light areas. So it's away from the edge. It's kind of dark, but not too dark. It's not the darkest. We'll get to that soon. Maybe a little bit on the eye there. Some of these that are a little bit more watery, because I had my little puddle over here that I didn't realize was there on the paper. I might have to adjust them. They're staying wet for a long time, and I'm not happy about that. I want them to dry into the paper, but if you have questions as I'm going through, please ask away. I can see the chat if you want to type it in. I'm trying to move all over, think about the different values, think about the different areas. And it gets to a point where once we get to a certain level of this, we do start to kind of lose the picture a little bit. And you just have to kind of trust this process and that it's going to kind of pull it back eventually to the right place, even though it may not seem like it's going to do that. I don't want to overdo it. I'm going to take a look and see if there aren't a couple places. My email is busy today. It's like everybody's trying to get their Thanksgiving emails out to everybody on campus. All right, I think that's good for this value. So now we've gotten 4. We had the super light, then the light, then the medium. Now we've got a little bit dark. So let's jump to a little more dark. So now I'm going to add in some more purple. I don't want this to be like pure purple. I can still save some of those. And that way I can get 6 total values. But this one's definitely much darker than the last one. So I'm going to start in a place where I know I want it dark. So maybe I'll put in a couple on top of, like this baseball t-shirt area down near the bottom, down in the areas where I know I need a nice dark. Maybe a little piece inside the mouth here is dark. There's an inside corner to the eye that's really dark there. Maybe I want to, yeah, it's not, this isn't dry, or I put some over there. Parts of the hair maybe are this dark. I want to be careful not to fill in too much of the hair with just purple. If you overdo it with one color, it's going to dominate everywhere. So you want to be a little bit careful. And I think I want these values outside to be medium, and I don't think I did enough of those before. So I may go back to those before I end purple. Maybe like a nice dark purple next to the ear. Make that chin and shoulder pop out. Maybe put one underneath the chin. see if I can pick out any more spots. There's not too many. I don't think I want to do too many darks on the face. I think that might make it hard later. Notice that sometimes I'll turn my brush. Most of the time I'm trying to go with this kind of diagonal stroke, but sometimes I'll just kind of follow my drawing and go vertical or diagonal in a different direction. It's got one there. Yeah, I think that's good. So I'm going to do a couple of these really dark ones. Sometimes you can't judge how dark you want them to get and where you want them to go until you start to get everything together. I'm going to do a couple of these. You know, these ones are definitely a step darker than even the last one. Get the iris inside of that, the pupil inside the iris there. Maybe there's a little part of the hair that's really dark right there. Maybe we have another one back in here. Kind of have a little bit too much purple back in there, but we'll be all right. You can always fix it later. I don't think I'm going to do too many of this one just because I think that's about as far as I want to go with just the one color. So we've got 6 values of purple there. Some of them are still wet, but hopefully you can kind of see those different ones. It's going to be more obvious. The lighter ones kind of blend in with the white. The darker ones tend to stand out quite a bit. Actually, let's do, I was saying I wanted to do some medium value ones. I'm going to grab a little bit of light. I'm going to mix up some medium values. I'm just going to put a couple of those around the outside edge of the shoulders. Maybe near the edge of the face, maybe near the back of the ear. You know, if you can see an area where you don't really have anything. Yeah, this all kind of seems to line up. I'm gonna put one more to kind of break that up. All right, I'm happy with that. So that's enough for purple. I'm gonna go with this one. So I've got this fuchsia, kind of pinkish, bright pinkish next. And what we can do is let's go through and do the opposite. So instead of going from light to dark, let's go the opposite way, start with the darks, and then work our way to the lights. Now, what you can do, this fuchsia, the first thing you want to think about is, you know, what is the value of your color that you're using? This one is, you know, it's not nearly as dark as the purple. So I can mix something into it to make it darker, and I can mix something to make it lighter. That way I can get a whole range of 6 values of a color. Because it's already on my palette, and it's probably kind of a friendly neighbor color-wise and keeping my brightness, why not use purple to make it a little bit darker? So I'm going to start with some of this, and I'm going to add a little bit of the purple to it to make it a darker pink fuchsia color. I don't want the purple to take over, but I think it will to a little bit of an extent. It's hard to, because the quality of the paints, this is like the Apple Barrel craft store acrylic. So this is cheap in how they make it. It's not highest quality, and the other one is higher quality. So you would expect the higher quality color to be dominant. So this is similar to maybe this, but it's a little bit reddish, more reddish or pinkish. So I'll paint in some of those and see how it looks. I could grab like a red and make this, or an alizarin, and make it a little bit more on the like darker, redder side, but I'm fine with what it looks like right now. This is probably a good one for some of the lip color, maybe under the nose a little bit. Maybe part of the iris is dark on that side. That's still not dry. Maybe a little bit of the eyebrow, a little bit of the hair. You know, usually your white brights and your darkest darks, those are usually 2 colors that you don't have a lot of. Most of the time, you're going to be painting those middle values the most, I think. You know, if you had to give them all a number, you know, white being 1, and let's say our black is 6, most of your colors are going to be 2s, 3s, 4s, and 5s. You're not going to use many 1s, and you're not going to use many 6s. And we'll do something warmer after this. I just kind of wanted to go with this one for now, since it was there. It's like a neighbor, it's easy. I'm getting to the point where I've got quite a few now. I don't want to overdo it. Maybe one over here. Maybe one in the shadow here. Maybe one over in the shadow here. And if you make one that's too dark in the zone, once you start to fill in all your values, you can start to make judgments, and you can just paint another color right on top of it. It's really pretty easy as you go through to fix part of this if you need to. All right. Oh, I know what I wanted to do. Before I get too far, I've got my iPad here. I'm going to take a quick picture of this. I meant to take progress shots. You know, obviously, we're going to have this video, but the idea is to give you a view of different stages. So every so often, if I don't remember, remind me to stand up and take a picture. All right, so now we're going to go almost a straight fuchsia. So this is kind of a little bit lighter, a little more closer to that halftone. So if it's the halftone area, I'm going to be painting a lot of these kind of next to the shadows. Not the darkest areas, and not where it kind of turns towards the light. These are probably good for this area out here. The cheaper paints, I feel myself grabbing a lot of paint very often because it's more transparent. Some of the colors are very pretty and they're nice. I usually get them just as kind of like an accent. If there's an extra color that I want, you know, why not spend $1 on a color that you're only going to use for accenting and just putting a little extra. But for your main paints, it's always better to have the nicer stuff. Maybe get a couple of these up in the hair. Grab a little more paint. Hopefully you can kind of see it. You know, I haven't lost the picture yet. It's usually at the end of the next color where things start to get a little bit harder to see and a little bit more mixed up. All right, I think maybe we'll do one in there, one in there, maybe one more in here, 2 more. All right, so I'm happy with that. Now we're going to start to get lighter. I've done the fuchsia, we added purple. So this one we might only get about 5 values, but oops, found another puddle. Anywhere where there's ridges inside the palette underneath, it's definitely causing the water to pool, and I don't think I was noticing that. Water on top of white is hard to see. All right, so there we go. Get a little more of this in here. So now I have a lighter version of this, and I'm going to start, you know, before I was moving from the light areas on the right over to the left areas, which were shadow. Now I'm kind of going from the left areas on shadow over to the light areas, which are on the right. So that's how you need to think about, you know, your values and how you're kind of building up and making this picture as you're going through and trying to think about the light and how it moves across your face, your famous person, your puppy, you know, whatever you're deciding to paint. How are you kind of moving the values from light to dark? That's what we're trying to do. So I'm kind of right on that light shadow edge now. We can always make an adjustment afterwards, after we fill in a lot of them. You're going to start to see it later. And there's bunches of different quick paints of this on the playlist. But I did just add a narrated version of how do I go through and make all these marks out, make my grid, transfer the drawing, shade in the drawing a little bit, and then add some extra lines for the grid on the areas that have more detail, that you want more detail. And we'll look at that in just a minute after we get, let's maybe try to do 2 or 3 colors today. All right, I think I'm happy with that. So now it's got a lighter value. I'll add some of these in the background also. So I'm not ignoring the background or painting the background afterwards. You're just looking at the values all over the picture and trying to decide where do they go, where can I put some so that they're not all right next to each other. If you see a big space that doesn't have some of your color in it, that's a good place to put some. Very cool and like pinky purple right now. I think that's good for this value. So I'm going to take this and I'm going to grab some more white. I'm going to mix up a lighter version of this color, and we'll move to maybe not our highlights, but right next to our highlights. All right, so I've got a nice light pink. So I'm thinking about these areas where it starts to move into the light. It's getting a little bit brighter. It's moving towards your highlights. It's maybe not the brightest area, but it's right next to it. Trying to spread them out, put some at the top, some on the side, and then I'll get some in the background. And 20 to 30 max. Don't keep going after that. If you overdo it, it'll show up. So try to pace yourself, pace it out. Don't put them everywhere. All right, I think I'm happy with that. I'm gonna do some background ones. Again, sometimes you end up being right next to one you did. Sometimes you're kitty corner, sometimes you're diagonal, but you're trying to pace it out so that, I can get some blues and some yellows and some oranges. I can get some different colors and values in some other places also. I'm not trying to just use these ones to do the whole thing. All right, I think I'm happy with that. So I'm gonna go to my last value. I'm gonna mix this one, rather than mixing it in this pile, I'm gonna mix it over here so that I just have the color that's on my brush plus the white. That's a good way to kind of make it a little bit lighter. I probably could even stand to wipe my brush off, but that's pretty light right there, down at the bottom there. So I'm looking for just my lightest areas where it's pretty much a highlight. The brightest areas that are catching the most light, that are facing towards my light source. And this is going to get slightly darker as it dries. But for now, just do some of these here, some of these there. If I accidentally paint on top of another square, that's okay. If I accidentally go outside of the line, that's okay. Maybe just put a couple of these in the background. Just gives us variety. The more variety, the more that this whole thing kind of feels like one whole picture together. All right, I think that's good. I'm gonna take another picture of this now since we've got 2 colors down. Sorry, just checking. Hearing so many emails, I wanna make sure none of them are too important. All right, get the camera, take another picture here. I'm going to show you. We'll see how good that it looks on here or not. It looks a little bit brighter on there. That looks closer to what it is here, but not that different. All right, what color's next? You tell me. I'll grab my bucket of paints. Cafe Bustelo, nice little place. Shove all my paints in there. Let's pick a warm color. So what warm color would you like to see? I've got yellow, I've got cad red,